Sometimes everything changes in a single evening, not because of a thunderstorm or an accident, not because of someone else's decisions, but because too much silence has built up in the world, and at last it demands to be heard. The sky above the coast was as cloudy as an old lens. The sun's rays barely pierced through as it slipped towards the horizon. The wind rolled in from the sea, damp and cool, tinged with salt, and something more, something uneasy, as if the shore itself remembered footsteps that were meant to return. The horse shuffled its hooves nervously. Elizabeth Vanderline gripped the reins tighter and looked around. The path she had followed wound along the cliffs, narrow, treacherous, still slick from the rain. Below, the waves crashed between white foam and black rock, and ahead, over the slope, a lone tower rose into view. She wasn't going to stop. This was just a formality. Elizabeth had come to inspect a new transport ship, recently delivered to a port off the Bristol Channel. One visit, one inspection, then back to London. Everything was on schedule until the storm disrupted the plan. The rain came abruptly, a veil of water swallowing the horizon. Each gust of wind struck like a hammer on an anchor chain. Her hood slipped back, wet hair clinging to her cheeks. The horse snorted uneasily, and she realized it was too dangerous to keep going. That's when she saw the lighthouse. The stone tower clung to the cliffside, pointing skyward as if pleading for rescue. Its silhouette was stubborn, immovable, not so much standing here as returning from a memory, one that had long since faded, but never left. She turned toward it. The path climbed upward, where the wind screamed louder and the sea sounded closer. When she reached the door, soaked and freezing, she knocked 3 times. The wood was rough, slick with fog. For a moment she thought no one would answer, that the lighthouse was abandoned, or that it had never existed at all. But then the door opened. A man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a dark wool shirt and faded trousers. His face was sharp, high cheekbones, heavy brows, a shadow of stubble, eyes as blue as a storm-racked sea, and just as cold. "What are you doing here?" He didn't raise his voice, but the way he spoke made her shiver more than the wind. "I'm sorry," she began. I I was on my way to the harbor, but the storm. I need shelter, just for a little while." He stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing not just her words, but her intent, and the entire road that had brought her to his door. Then he stepped aside. "Come in." The door shut behind her with a quiet, final click. Inside smelled of salt and kerosene. A hanging lamp cast long shadows on the wooden walls. The room was small, a table, a stove, a narrow ladder leading upward. The silence was not hostile, only ancient, like the tower itself. The man asked no questions. He pointed to the couch, set a blanket beside it, and climbed the stairs. The steps groaned, then silence again. Elizabeth peeled off her soaked cloak, wrapped herself in the blanket, and sat. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, everything stood still. The lamp swung softly on its hook. Its flame flickered like a breath. She looked toward the stairs, toward the man who had vanished into the upper floor. And suddenly, she felt an unfamiliar calm, as if this weren't a stranger's house, but a place she had once known, in a life she had never lived. Who is he? Why is he here, alone? She didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't need to. She didn't want to leave, so she went to bed. The morning came without the sun. but it was warm. Elizabeth woke to the scent of fresh bread and lemon tea. The room was bright, not from the lamp, but from the gray, even light seeping through the window. The fog still crawled along the shore, but it no longer felt threatening. There were 2 mugs on the table. One stood across from her. Everything was tidy, a little too tidy, as if the person living here was always prepared for someone else's presence, but not for conversation. She heard footsteps, first upstairs, then coming down the stairs. Isaac. He descended without acknowledging her at first, walked to the stove, added water to the kettle, and only then cast her a brief glance. "You stayed?" "Not leaving isn't quite the same," she replied. He didn't smile, but the corner of his lips twitched. Almost. "Usually there's no one still here by morning." "Do you often let people in for the night?" "Number?" He slid a mug toward her. "Tea?" She nodded and took a sip. Hot, slightly tart, no sugar. But in that moment, perfect. "Thank you," she said. He sat across from her, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes on the window. She broke the silence first. "I was headed to the port. A ship was supposed to arrive from Vanderline's shipyard, a new transport. But the storm seems to have changed everything." He nodded. "You're Vanderline?" "Yes, Elizabeth, daughter of James Vanderline. The company is Vanderline and Sons." A pause. "Paradoxical," he muttered. "Considering he has a daughter." She gave a small smile, the first real response. "And you? Who are you?" He looked her in the eyes, not challengingly, just directly. So directly she nearly looked away, but didn't. "Isaac, the lighthouse keeper." "Just that?" "It's enough." The day passed like a dream. Elizabeth helped with small things, wiping glass, sorting the pantry, fixing the hook on the inner door. Isaac didn't ask, but he didn't refuse. He simply accepted her help, silently. And the silence was becoming shared. That evening they sat by the stove. The lamplight swayed gently, while outside the window the darkness thickened, not stormy, but velvety and calm. "And how did you become a keeper?" "I used to search for something, constantly, everywhere." "Did you find it?" "Number. I got tired of searching." That's when they said, "You want the lighthouse? It's yours. Alone. For good." So I took it. "Why?" He shrugged. "When you lose people, the first thing you want is silence. Then you want to forget, then to understand. And eventually, all that remains is the light. Because unlike people, light doesn't ask questions." She looked at him, at his hands, rough and scratched, at his eyes filled with too much sky. "Isaac," she began, then stopped. He didn't ask what she'd meant to say. He just said, "I know." The night was quieter than before, no storm, no words. Elizabeth fell asleep on the old couch, wrapped in the plaid blanket. And just before her eyes closed, she saw Isaac climbing the stairs to the tower to turn on the lights. Not because he had to, but because it was his way of speaking. And she thought, if someone turned on a light for me every night, maybe I'd stop being afraid of the dark too. By the 3rd day, the lighthouse no longer felt foreign. The wooden floor creaked only on the 4th plank from the entrance. The key to the storeroom sat in a tin labeled coffee. The stairs to the tower swayed slightly at the topmost turn. And Isaac, he appeared and disappeared with such precision. It was as if he weren't a man at all, but a shadow, one who had walked the same paths for years. Elizabeth felt it like a ritual. She no longer felt like a guest. But she wasn't at home here either. She helped, sometimes on her own, sometimes with his silent approval. A few times, he even said thank you, softly, like the word scraped his throat on the way out. But there were things he never said. Upstairs, in a room where he kept his tools and books, she found a box. Old, wooden, heavy lidded, no lock. She didn't mean to open it, only pull back the cloth it sat under. But there it was, waiting. Inside, letters. Hundreds. Folded carefully, tied in neat bundles of twine. Some yellowed, some still white with sharp corners. Not a single address. Not a single stamp. Each one written on the same letterhead. In the corner, an embossed emblem, an anchor and a star. She picked one at random and unfolded it. You won't hear this, I know. But if I could turn back, I'd stay. Where you are, even if it's in a storm. She froze, her fingers clenched. Then, footsteps at the door. She looked up. He was standing there, silent. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to. He didn't come closer. He only said, this is all I have left. The letters? Number. The silence between them. She wanted to speak again. But he had already turned away. Later at the table, they ate in silence. Then she asked, those letters? Who are they to? He didn't answer right away. Then he placed his fork down and said, my brother. Is he gone? He nodded. At sea? Yes. She waited, he went on. His name was Jonathan. We grew up together, worked the same ship. He was the navigator. I was the radio operator. The Athena, 8 years ago. A pause. It sank off the Bristol Channel, Elizabeth said. I remember. It was in the news. Then you know the captain was drunk. The alarm system failed. 23 dead. My brother was one of them. And you survived? I was lucky. I was up in the cockpit. He was below deck. When the hull was breached, the lifeboat launched. But he never made it in. His voice had no emotion. Dry. Flat. As if he weren't speaking about his own life, but someone else's. I'm sorry, she said. He shook his head. No need. It's just, I don't leave the shore anymore. I keep watch over the fire. Make sure someone else doesn't get caught in the dark. That night she couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but thought. About him. About the letters. About how someone could speak to the dead for years and still go on living. She got up, went downstairs to the kitchen. Everything was just as it had been. The table, the tea, the creaky chair. Only the silence was louder. On the wall, a black and white photograph. 2 young men. One serious, the other smiling. Both in uniform. Isaac and Jonathan. It's not the light that warms us, but those we light it for. Toward morning, she stepped into the doorway of the tower and whispered into the quiet, you're not alone. And for the first time, she believed that he, up in the tower, had heard her. The lighthouse moved by its own time. There were no clocks, no schedule, only light wind and the slow, steady pulse of distant waves beating against the rocks like a heart against a rib cage. Elizabeth began to lose herself in its rhythm. Sometimes it felt like she had been here a week. Other times, only a day. Isaac was always nearby, but he remained at a distance. He didn't push her away, but he never pulled her closer. It wasn't indifference. It was something gentler. A silence that felt almost like care. Care that expressed itself through restraint. She didn't want to disturb the fragile harmony between them, but one letter broke it for her. She climbed back up to the attic. The box was still there, waiting. It wasn't curiosity that led her this time, but something else. A quiet pull from inside herself. She opened another bundle. Isaac's handwriting was easy to recognize, straight, slightly angular, as though the words had torn themselves out, but stopped just short of bleeding. One sheet sat apart from the rest. The paper was heavier, older, the ink faded but still legible. In the corner, a date, 7 years ago. She unfolded it. You would have understood her. I know you would have understood. She had a way of hearing even the things I was afraid to say. I saved someone, but not her, as if I chose. But I didn't. I just reached one lifeboat, not the other. She looked at me until the last moment, and I can still see that look. You know, John, I still can't write when my hands are shaking. But if I ever disappear, you'll know I remembered her more often than I remembered myself. Elizabeth read slowly, almost whispering. Each paragraph was like stepping onto thin ice. One more step, and you'd fall straight through. Who was she? The woman who'd also died on the ship? Why had Isaac never mentioned her? Her heart sank. She realized then it wasn't just silence that lived in the lighthouse. Memory lived there too. A memory that lingered, like a light left burning on an empty wall. Later that day, as they worked side by side, repairing the railing on the path, Elizabeth made a decision. Isaac, can I ask you something? He nodded. In one of the letters, she hesitated. There was a woman. Did she die at sea too? He didn't respond right away. He straightened, set his tools down, and looked toward the horizon. Long silence. Then, her name was Marie. The name dropped into the air like a stone into water. No splash, but the ripples spread outward. We met by chance, kept in touch for a few months. She was working on security documents, government assignment, not part of the crew. But she was on board? He nodded. She had a ticket. She wasn't supposed to sail. But then everything changed. I didn't know. I just saw her on the deck. Elizabeth said nothing. He went on. When it began, I tried to find Marie. I chose to go down. In the boat she was in, was already capsizing. I didn't make it. I was 5 meters away. A pause. I don't know why, but I've remembered her look for the rest of my life. Maybe because it wasn't accusing. He looked at her, surprised. Number. It was forgiving, as if she already knew I couldn't save her, and forgave me anyway. That night, Elizabeth didn't speak to him. She didn't approach. She didn't ask. She simply lit the lamp by her bed and left the door open. And in the morning, Isaac left a piece of paper outside her door. No name, no date, no signature. I haven't forgotten. But for the first time, I wish someone else knew it too. A Christmas stillness had settled over the coast. Isaac hadn't decorated the house. He didn't believe in traditions, at least not the kind that brought joy. But there was a plate on the table. On it, 6 ginger cookies and a teapot. That was his memory of Christmas, a warm mug, a quiet sweetness, and the light above the sea. Smells like cinnamon, Elizabeth said. He nodded. Old recipe. My mother used to bake them when my brother and I came home. She paused, the mug warming her hands. So, you're still celebrating then? No, he said, gazing out the window. Just that memory survives better in scent. They sat at the table, silent, but not empty. It was a pause, warm, mutual, between two distant worlds that, for some reason, didn't argue anymore. In London, Elizabeth said softly, on a night like this, even the streetcars go quiet. It's like the whole city becomes a child and finally falls asleep. Isaac didn't answer. Instead, he lit a candle. Not because it was dark, but because flame, he believed, was fairer than electric light. Outside, snow fell slowly. They drank tea. He ate one cookie at a time, mechanically. She in 2 bites, with quiet delight. Neither said they felt less alone. But both knew. At exactly midnight, when the candle had burned halfway down and the tea had gone cold, like a letter never written, it happened, a flash. Not a sound, not a call, just a light. Red, sharp, on the horizon between sea and sky. A single drop of blood on a black canvas. Elizabeth stood. Did you see that? Isaac didn't move. He only set his cup down slowly. It happens every year, he said. Exactly midnight. Christmas. What is it? I don't know. But I've seen it 6 years in a row. Same time, same place. She stepped closer to the window. It could be a signal. He shook his head. There's no one out there. No ships. No stations. Just reefs and emptiness. I went there years ago. Nothing. But you can't be sure. Sometimes knowing is more dangerous than not. Elizabeth turned toward him. Are you afraid? His jaw tightened. I'm afraid of losing what I have left. She looked at him quietly. Isaac, someone might be out there. Maybe they're waiting. He got up, walked to the window, watched the light blink again, faint, rhythmic. I didn't save them, he said. Not my brother, not her. But maybe I can save someone now. A pause. Good, she said. He took his old wool cloak, pulled the hood up, grabbed a lantern. She followed him. At the threshold, he turned. You don't have to come. I won't let you go alone, she replied. And together they stepped into the night, into the fog, into a Christmas without carols. The shore was empty. Snow lay in soft patches across the rocks. Near the water, an old boat waited, a fisherman's skiff, long retired. Isaac had restored it, painted it, named it the Third Guardian, because he only sailed at night. Careful, he said, helping her aboard. The water's stronger than it looks. They pushed off from shore. The lighthouse light cut through the fog. The sea stirred gently, sleepy waves. But ahead the red light pulsed again, like someone calling. Elizabeth sat still, staring out at the water. The moonlight shimmered across the waves like memory. She didn't ask where they were going. She knew. Into the deep. Into what had never been said, never been lived, never been let go. Isaac rowed slowly, each stroke like a word he'd never written. The signal blinked, once, then again. It's nautical code, he whispered, not just a light. What is it saying? He paused. Pause. S. Elizabeth's breath caught. That's not a coincidence. Isaac's eyes searched the thickening fog, and then he saw her. For just a moment. On the deck, white shirt, dark hair flying in the wind, her hand reaching forward. Marie. He shut his eyes, too fast. He began but stopped. He was trembling, just enough to see. May I? Elizabeth asked. He met her gaze, then nodded. She opened the box, the one that held the letters. She took the first, held it to the oil lamp, and lit it. Blue, yellow, crimson. He didn't look away. He watched. One by one, she fed the fire. He whispered the names. John, Marie, Athena, Storm, Forgiveness. The flames lit their faces, the sea vanished in the glow, and when the last letter turned to ash, the fog lifted. The red light was gone. Only the moon remained, white, silent. They rowed back in silence, only wood creaking, water lapping. On shore, as Elizabeth stepped onto the snow, Isaac said, "Thank you." For what? He looked straight at her. For staying, She nodded. And then, just before entering the lighthouse, she said, "It's not the light that calls us. It's someone who believes we'll see it." He didn't respond. But later, when he lit the lamp in the tower, its glow was just a little warmer than before. The morning was gray, not somber, just lightless. As if the day hadn't begun at all, only a curtain of fog had been pulled across the world, leaving everything suspended, unchanged. The lighthouse was silent, utterly still. No footsteps, no creaking beams. Only the slow drip from the roof and the distant, muted echo of the surf. Isaac sat at the kitchen table. In front of him, an empty mug and a notebook with a thick, dark cover. A quill rested in his hand, but he wasn't writing, just staring out the window, as if waiting for something to take shape in the sky. Elizabeth approached quietly, not because she was trying to sneak up on him, but because by now she had learned to move through this house as if it were part of her. "Were you awake?" she asked gently. "No." "Is everything all right?" He turned to her, really turned, not through her, not past her, straight into her eyes. There was no coldness in his gaze. "I think so," he said. A pause. Then he turned the notebook slightly so she could see the page. "Today is the day I started back." She read the words, said nothing, only sat beside him. They sat for a while, in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because silence no longer needed to prove anything. Isaac traced a finger along the notebook's edge. "You know, I used to think that returning meant going back to where you left off. But I don't think that's true anymore. What is it then?" He looked out the window again. The sea beyond it lay still, wide, flat, unreadable. "It's when you finally stop being only where you were lost." She watched him carefully. He continued, "I thought if I stopped remembering, the pain would fade. But it didn't. It just moved. Into my hands, into my breath, into the light." "And now?" she asked softly. He hesitated, as if needing her presence to believe he had the right to speak it aloud. "Now, I think I'm ready to open the door, not to the past, but to the light." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's what the real lighthouse is," she said. "Not the one out there on the tower, but the one inside." He didn't smile, but there was a new crease at the corner of his eyes, not from sorrow, from warmth. They ate breakfast together, not as guest and host, but as two people who had weathered something, not a storm of wind and water, but of memory. At noon, they climbed the tower. The wind was steady even, the sea deep but calm. Isaac stood at the lens, watching the horizon. Elizabeth stepped beside him. "It's still the same horizon out there," he said. "But it feels different." "Because you are," she replied. He glanced at her. "And so are you. We're not both alone anymore." He nodded slowly. In the stillness of the tower, amid salt and iron and the scent of polished glass, something shifted, quietly, permanently. Later, as Elizabeth gathered her books from the room, she noticed another notebook, the one with the letters. He hadn't burned them all. He'd kept a few. On the first page, a new entry. "John, if you were alive, I'd tell you this isn't about forgetting. It's about beginning to live again. With the memory still intact. You didn't betray them. You didn't give up. You just went forward. Because someone has to go, even if someone else can't." She closed the notebook and realized they were truly together now. Not because they were close, not because they had spoken, but because neither of them was alone. The snow came suddenly. Not much, just a thin layer, like someone had spilled milk across the cliffs and banks. Softly, almost absent-mindedly, but it touched everything. The path to the tower, the roof of the boathouse, even the small frost-laced window in her room. Elizabeth woke early, before dawn. She lay still with her eyes closed, listening to the house breathe. Something was different. Not louder, not quieter, just a subtle tension, like the stillness of a place before someone leaves it. She got up, dressed, and went to the window. The snow reflected what little light there was, making the world almost translucent, as if reality had thinned out, and she could press her fingers through it into a place where everything still remained. Isaac wasn't in the kitchen, nor in the tower. She found him outside, near the boat box. He was holding the rope used to tether the dinghy, his coat hem fluttering in the wind, his hair brushing the collar. He heard her approach, but didn't turn. "Are you leaving again?" she asked. He nodded. "Just to check the shore. Snow hides the paths, and the wind changes things." "The lighthouse isn't just for those at sea," she said. "It's also for those who return." He turned to her then, looked directly. "You're leaving, aren't you?" She nodded. "This afternoon. The bridge is open again. The trains are coming through." A pause. "I can't stay. Not now. It's not that I want to leave. It's that I have to go back. Back to life. To what's waiting for me on the other side of the world." He didn't speak, just looked up towards the lighthouse. They didn't say goodbye. They just drank tea like they always did, listened to the wind rattling the windows, sat longer than they needed to, quieter than they had before. When the time came, she dressed. The coat, the scarf, the gloves. At the door, she turned slightly. "Isaac, sometimes I think that if I hadn't come here, I never would have heard the silence." He stepped closer, but didn't touch her. "And I would have kept hiding inside it. Then," she paused, "then maybe we both needed it." He nodded. "And now?" "And now, let there be light." She stepped out without looking back. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The wind gathered around her shoulders like a farewell you don't speak aloud. The walk to the station was short, but felt long. When the door closed behind her, Isaac remained standing. Then slowly he climbed the steps up to the tower. There, on the windowsill beneath the old compass, he saw her note. One line, written in smooth, steady handwriting: "If you wanted to start over, I'd stay." He sat down, held the paper for a long while. Outside, the shore was white, silent. Light glinted off scattered ice. He felt the cold, but he wasn't hiding from it anymore. He reached for a notebook, the empty one, opened to the first page, and wrote, "Today is the day I started coming back." Then he stood, put on his coat, and stepped out into the day. The city met him with rain, fine, invisible almost, but tenacious. It fell on his shoulders, dripped down his collar, soaked into the fabric of his cloak. It was cold, but Isaac didn't feel it. He stood on the platform, as if waiting for a train, even though it had long since left. The station was empty. Only the occasional passerby and the hoarse voice on the speakers remained. By the looks of it, he was late, but he was here, and for the first time in a long time. He had a note in his pocket. The paper was soaked, but the ink was still strong. "If you wanted to start over, I'd stay." He reread it a dozen times. He wasn't looking for meaning in it. He just felt it said exactly what couldn't be said otherwise. Someone walked behind him, a suitcase clattering on the tile. Isaac lifted his head. The light of the station lantern trembled in the drops. In the distance, a figure, a woman's. There was no umbrella. Shoulders lifted. Elizabeth. He didn't approach immediately. He just stared, just like when he'd first seen her on the lighthouse doorstep, drenched, stubborn. But now, she was standing in the city. And the rain wasn't a storm. It was just the background. She turned around. Their gazes met. He took a step, then another, slowly, without words, but in every movement, something he hadn't said before. When he approached, she didn't smile. She just said, "I knew you'd come." "I wasn't sure," he answered honestly. It didn't matter. He wanted to say something else, but she'd already reached up and took his fingers, squeezed, not firmly, but enough. "I'm not hiding anymore," he said. Elizabeth nodded, silently. It was only then that he saw that her eyes weren't wet from the rain. They walked together, just walked, through streets he hadn't walked in years, a city that, like him, had changed, but not gone. It was there, alive. Isaac didn't recognize himself, not because he was different. It was because he was no longer just the shadow of the lighthouse. They stopped at the window of a small cafe. Inside, lights, teapots, glass jars of cookies. Everything is simple. Everything is real. "Shall we go in?" she asked. He nodded. She squeezed his palm tighter. They went in. It was warm, the smell of muffins. Someone was laughing at the counter. Music playing. Suddenly, Isaac felt heavy. Not from fatigue, but from letting go. He sat down by the window. Elizabeth sat across from him. She took off her coat. She straightened her hair. She looked at him, long, quietly. And she said, "You've changed." "No," he replied. "I just came out of the lighthouse." She didn't laugh, but the smile was in her gaze. Later, as evening descended on the city, they returned to the train station, not to leave, just to walk. The lights of the trains gleamed in the distance again. Isaac stopped. "Can I give you something?" "Sure." He took out a thin notebook from his inside pocket. The wrapping was ragged. The paper's old. He put it on the bench. "It's a diary. I started it after I was alone. But today is the last entry." Elizabeth didn't open it, only asked, "What did you write?" He looked at her. Slowly he said, "She came with the storm." She stayed in the silence and left not sorrow, but light. She didn't answer, just held out her hand. He took it. He never let go again. The wind had picked up again on the coast, but on the tower, the light was on, not for the ghosts, not for the past, for those still searching for the shore. Who still hopes someone will turn on the lamp just because you exist, because there is someone now.